Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me is Ron Reich. Say hi, Ron.
Hey, how's it going? I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited for you to be here too, because it's so almost serendipitous that we met by accident several years back in Colombia through mutual friends that we had. And we didn't even necessarily know each other well or keep in touch. But then when I started asking past guests to connect me to people I should talk to on the show, that you were one of the first people that came up from Cindy, our mutual friend, Cindy Childress.
Cindy, absolutely.
And it was like, oh my gosh, I do know Ron. We met that one time. We had dinner in Colombia. It was great. We should have kept in touch. So I'm so glad to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, thanks again for having me. So my name is Ron Reich, and my technical job title these days would be a marketing and business growth strategist. I primarily am focused on helping primarily emerging entrepreneurs, typically who are doing lower six figures, and I really help them go to seven figures. That's kind of the sweet spot of who I work with. That's what I'm currently doing. And as we'll talk about, I started out as a behind the scenes person, and then I eventually graduated to being more of a personal brand.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah, because that's something that I've been working on too. I've been behind the scenes for several years, working on other brands that people recognize, and have started going out on my own. So I'm particularly interested in your journey. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, where you started being the behind the scenes guy. What was that like, and who'd you work with?
Yeah. So actually, the first thing I did, actually, before I tell you that, let me go way back to kind of tell you my origin story, which you'll appreciate as a copywriter, is really my journey of how I got to what I'm doing today. I actually started back when I was in second grade. What happened was I came home from school one day, and my mother told me that I was going to have to be held back, that I was going to have to repeat the second grade.
Wow.
And so I was 5 years old at the time. And as you can imagine, this was really traumatic for me. I cried for days, and it was not difficult. Long story short, I had to repeat the second grade. And pretty much from that point on, from the time I was 5 till I was really probably for the next 30 years, legitimately, I always felt like there was something wrong with me. There was something that was like I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't good enough. And later on, I found out that the reason why I was held back is because I had bad motor skills, which is what my teacher said, which really meant it's because I had bad handwriting. Essentially, I was held back. I was traumatized for life because I had bad handwriting.
Oh my gosh.
Long story short, so I ended up feeling like there was something wrong with me. So from there, I always kind of overcompensated. I am smart. I'm going to be a high achiever. I'm going to be an A player. And so that's why I ended up doing pretty good in school. I ended up actually going to law school, because that's what you do if you're a smart person. I ended up becoming a lawyer. And long story short, I ended up not lasting long as a lawyer after I passed the bar exam. I think I worked for about 2 years as a lawyer. It just wasn't for me. And it was around that time that I found out about online marketing. My first project that I actually did, this was back when they called it information marketing. This was back in 2006. I got into my gateway drug into the direct response world was our good friend, Dan Kennedy, who's still is my number one influence vis-a-vis marketing. And I ended up, my first project that I ever launched was actually a project on how to do good in law school, essentially. And then I had a program on how to pass the bar exam. And so those ended. I couldn't retire or quit my job from those projects, but eventually I partnered with an expert who's a dating expert. This was in the dating and relationship space, and that was actually the main job, my main project. I worked in that business for 8 years, and we actually built that business up to a good level. We got almost to seven figures. Didn't quite hit seven figures. We got into the upper multiple six figures, and then I kind of got a little bit disenfranchised with that business. So I ended up wanting to get into something else, which I ended up getting into the dog training space. So I ended up launching a dog training website. And that's kind of interesting that business was actually the expert that we used for that business was actually Bev the Shih Tzu gal, which is a fictional character who is based on my mother. And it just so happens that it's one of those, speaking of serendipity, it's one of those like serendipitous things that the avatar, the people who buy Shih Tzu, my site is just devoted to the one brand, Shih Tzu. And it turns out the avatar of people who own Shih Tzu and buy Shih Tzu information products are like senior women over the age of basically senior women, like my mother. So it turned out to be totally perfect. So anyway, I ran that business as well. And then it was actually around that time when I launched that business, or even before that, this guy, Ryan Levesque, who I'm sure you and your listeners know, he was actually my coach at the time. He was actually my coach back in 2012. He was coaching me for both the dating business as well as the dog training business. And it was around 2015, actually late 2014, early 2015. This is when his business started to really take off. When I first got connected with him, he was not the Ryan Levesque that we know now. And then he ended up launching this mastermind at the end of 2014, and he needed somebody to coach his mastermind members. And so he ended up having me being the person that coached his mastermind members because I knew his stuff pretty much better than anyone at the time. And that was kind of my first step into helping entrepreneurs and business owners grow their business. And then, long story short, he brought me on just to coach his mastermind members. And then before I knew it, he needed some help with some other stuff. And before I knew it, I was like 4 months later, I was his full-time marketing director. And so I ended up being Ryan Levesque's marketing director for 2 years. I think it was from 2015, basically all of 2015, all of 2016. And then, I ended up moving on to other things and really building my personal brand at the beginning of 2017. So essentially two full years. And so then after my time with Ryan ended, that's when I decided to really launch my own personal brand. So that's the quick story.
I love everything. I was like busily scribbling down notes of stuff that I wanted to circle back on. Like a quick primer for everybody that is new to the podcast. Copywriting is like sales and marketing writing specifically to help grow businesses. And Dan Kennedy is a big leading influencer, thought leader in that field. And so a lot of people that listen to the show who are also copywriters like me and Ron, like our background is in copywriting, they know of these people. But I just want to give you a little bit of context. And I think it's really interesting. So to spend several years going through law school, to circle back to that, then pass the bar, which I know is a hell of a lot of work. I think I made it as far as studying for the LSAT and taking the LSAT and then deciding, fuck that. I don't want to do this. So I know that that's hard. And I was told that I needed to be a lawyer too. You're a smart person. Go be a doctor or a lawyer.
Right. Yeah.
To quit that, create your own product to help people become lawyers, which I think is really smart way to leverage your past experience versus, falling into that trap of thinking I have to start over from the beginning because I'm quitting this thing versus what you did, which was use your experience to try and help other people. I thought it was great.
Yeah. All the books I read about starting an information marketing business, they would say, well, talk about what you know, teach people what you know. I said, okay, I just finished law school, so I know a lot about law school and studying. So let me do that.
And I love that because I think there are a lot of people that deal with head trash when starting a business, especially in the information business, like you were talking about. But if you're listening to this, don't discount the power of a good idea at the right time in your life. I am literally here hosting this podcast because of a book that I read one day on a whim that taught me about copywriting, which was a thing that I didn't know existed. And so everything was kind of like you were talking about, just a series of steps. Taking one step led me to the next step, and got me ultimately here. So sometimes it feels like it's just all over the place and there's no line. But when you look back at it like this, you can see.
There's that famous quote. It reminds me of that famous quote from Steve Jobs. Like you only connect the dots when you look backwards. exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, I'm here because of this, and this, but you never planned it that way. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. So maybe like if you're listening to me and Ron right now, maybe if you feel like you're not where you're supposed to be, you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
And that's always, you're always exactly where you're supposed to be, for sure. And then we can do a whole podcast about this, but you kind of mentioned it's just about knowing that next step, and really really the secret. What I'm 41 years old, almost 42, so I don't know everything, but I know some things. I've built successful businesses, helped many other people build their own, multiple 7-figure businesses. So I know things. And the truth of the matter is that it's really just being on the path. As long as you're moving forward, that really is the quote unquote secret to being happy and fulfilled. And it really doesn't really matter kind of what results happen, as long as you're on the road. There's this really great book by a guy named, I always forget his last name. It's William something. The book is called The Trick. It's by this, it's actually not a business book. It's more of a fun memoir type book, where this guy is he's a journalist. He's this broke journalist from England, but he always like covered all these famous celebrities. And he wrote for like Esquire or one of these magazines, but he was always broke. And then he wanted to find out, well, why am I broke? What do people who are rich know that I do not know? So he spends a year hanging out with all these really rich people. Like he hangs out with Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street dude, the guy Dennis Felix, the founder of Maxim, and like these really like billionaires and 100-millionaire type dudes. And towards the end of the book is called The Trick. And then towards the end of the book, what he says is that the trick is that people who are successful, they're actually running the wrong way. They're going in the wrong direction 99% of the time. And it's just that one time when they're, like you said, when they're in the right place at the right time, when they have the right idea at the wrong time, right time, that's what allowed them to really get to those amazing riches. So the trick really is just to stay on the path. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that is helpful for your listeners.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. And I think there are two things that really stick out to me about that. One is this idea that if you don't know a thing, you can't teach a thing. So I love that this guy said, I don't know anything about being rich. I'm going to go hang out with people who are rich and learn what they know and then go teach it to people. So that's a viable business model right there. I want to learn something about it and then turn around and teach people. Absolutely. Fantastic. And I just lost track of the second one. So if I remember that, we'll come back to it. But I just think that that's really interesting because more successful people, it's not that they have these brilliant ideas. I know what I was going to say. It's not that they have this preponderance of brilliant ideas and the brilliant timing and anything like that. It's that they're willing to not get it right more often. They're willing to try things out and see what happens until something sticks.
There are so many examples of this. I mean, this is really the ultimate lesson. One of my a couple favorite ones is like if you look at Walt Disney. Walt Disney, if you read a biography, it's right here on my bookshelf, this very thick biography of Walt Disney. It took him, I think, from when he started getting into animation, it actually took him about 10 years before the first Mickey Mouse movie came out, the Steamboat Willie. And that really got him to a good level of success, but everybody thought he was crazy. Kind of before that, with the stuff he wanted to do with animation, which was very groundbreaking at the time. But then after he had that, it was all about the next thing. And then he almost goes bankrupt, or he goes bankrupt with Snow White. And then anyways, even after he became the Walt Disney, and he was after he did the Mickey Mouse movie, he was one of the most famous dudes in the country. But still, he ended up going bankrupt, and he ended up losing all sorts of money, going, throughout his entire career. Another really good one. So again, and it's like this. You look at any really successful people, you'll see all these crazy ups and downs. Another one of my favorite ones is I recently read a biography of George Washington, and I was a history major in college, and I don't really remember a lot of these details, but essentially George Washington, who is like, considered one of the great leaders of history, the founder of, the United States, the founding father, he actually, he lost almost every battle he led up until the Revolutionary War. He actually lost almost every battle, but he was able, it was kind of one of these, like, talk about being in the right place at the right time. He lost all these battles, but he would always end up in a better place vis-a-vis his career, even afterwards, for whatever reason. And then, long story short, he ended up being the kind of most qualified person to lead the revolutionaries in America. So the point is that, like, if you look at everyone, you just see failure after failure after failure after failure after failure. And it really is just, like you said, it's just about being able to keep going forward, even in knowing you're not going to get it right.
Oh, yeah. I think that's really interesting because so once upon a time, I majored in political science and French. I don't know what I thought I was going to do with that degree living in South Texas at the time, but so I studied Federalist Papers and anti-Federalist papers and a lot of the political science. And a lot of the founding fathers basically designed the presidency for George Washington. So that's really interesting to hear that story about how he failed over and over again, and kind of think about how the highest office in the land was designed for someone who is technically a failure, who failed over and over and over again to the highest position in the land.
Right. Well, they're all, again, the same. It's kind of the trick thing, right? He was technically a failure until he wasn't, and he was the dude who won the Revolutionary War, and then he's like the ultimate dude. Yeah, for sure.
That's what I love about that, especially for those of us that can get stuck in that trap of, oh my God, another failure. This is so demoralizing. I don't know if I was meant for this. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying that you could be the president, but maybe you could be the president. Just saying.
100%.
And I love, I'm a Disney nerd. Of course, I'm wearing my Jack Skellington hoodie like I almost always do. And this video is not going anywhere, so it's always a tease. They get to guess what the Jack Skellington hoodie looks like. But I love this idea of, he just had this mouse and he was obsessed with the mouse. And I've read stories about him too, that all kinds of people, once Steamboat Willie went out, they wanted to buy Mickey Mouse. And that was the thing that he would never sell. No matter how desperate things got, I'm not giving up on this mouse. And I think that really speaks to the power of following your gut and making choices that feel right for you, even if other people are telling you, well, this doesn't really make sense.
Absolutely.
I know, kind of like that teacher, to circle all the way back to the beginning, saying that you need to be held back because of bad handwriting. I think so many of us have this experience of somebody saying, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or that's the wrong choice, that we carry with us for like ever. It gets in there. And yeah, I really I never want to be that person that causes someone to give up on their dreams. So I take that shit kind of personally now when somebody tells me their dreams and other people are like, you can't do that. Fuck you. Maybe they can.
Absolutely. I mean, it is true that our potential really is unknowable, and it really is limitless, and really pretty much anything with certain physical constraints, anything that anyone else has done, anything you've seen anyone else do, you can do as well. There really are no limitations there. It's true, other than the ones we place upon ourselves, because we're all really the same thing. We're all humans. We're all made of the same material. Like, no one's really better than anybody else.
Oh yeah. And your brain is so freaking powerful. Whatever you tell it, it can do, and your body can do, like, it can find a way to make that happen. One of my favorite stories, going back to like history and people that have faced enormous odds. There was, I think his name's Roger Banner, I want to say, the guy that ran the 4-minute mile.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And he was the first one to ever run an under 4-minute mile in an age when people were telling him, this is not physically possible. Human beings cannot run that fast. And he was like, well, watch me. And then in the following years, dozens of people would go on to break that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. It's a perfect example.
Yeah, sometimes it takes that one person believing, nope, you guys are all wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you what I'm capable of. And then all of a sudden, this whole thing is possible that wasn't possible for generations of people before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure.
Oh, I love this. So I have a feeling this is what made you kind of step out from behind the gurus and start building your own brand. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I think that there's definitely something to, yeah. There was always that part of me that like really liked writing, that really liked, that just, yeah, 100%. But I always had this feeling, a couple of things. Thing number one is that I definitely always had this desire to really get my message out there, to get like my words out there, for sure. Like that was definitely something that was really, really important to me. And I was always, well, hopefully we'll talk about this in a second. I was so terrified to do it, which I can tell you kind of how I got over that in a couple of minutes. And so that's kind of like one thing is I always just like have that, like you said, that gut feeling, like this is something that I have to do. It wouldn't feel right to be that behind the scenes person for the rest of my life. And at the same time, I think also because of, because I was held back and because I felt that, there was something wrong with me. And because I felt that, and that caused me to be the behind the scenes person for so long, that almost gave me that extra impetus. Like it's like almost, I need to do this just to like really show other people that it's possible, just to like demonstrate to them. Cause even like you hear me talking right now and you hear me like stumble on my words. I'm like not a professional speaker, right? But like I've spoken on some big stages. I've been on some big podcasts. I've worked with some, who's who of the industry. So again, and I'm just a kind of an awkward dude, so if I can do it, so can you.
I don't see you as awkward at all. So that's interesting how like we perceive ourselves and others perceive us from outside of us. It's always interesting to me, especially if I have someone take on a writing test for me and they try to write for me, how wildly different people's interpretations of how I speak and how I think can be. So yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, tell me a little bit more about, I imagine that ties into what you mentioned about being terrified to put yourself out there, that like, what if I get it wrong or they don't think I'm a professional?
Oh yeah. Like this is like, that's one of those things where in hindsight, it's kind of like crazy. I kind of want to go back in time and strangle myself because it's like really all these things that you're so freaked out about were not a big deal. But I remember a couple of really specific things where I remember my first actual foray into building a personal brand was actually, I wanted to actually be a personal development blogger. I wanted to like blog about productivity and things along these lines. This was right around when I was starting to build my personal brand. And I kind of started doing that towards the tail end of when I was working with Ryan Levesque as his marketing director. And I remember when I got my first blog post published, my first guest blog published, I was so excited when I saw that it was published. But I remember I was terrified. Like it's so crazy in retrospect. I was terrified to actually like share it like on my personal Facebook profile. Because hey, I wrote this, hey, and that kind of was, that took for me a lot of courage. And then afterwards, which is again crazy in hindsight, then believe it or not, the first year that I started building my personal brand, I still actually was I really was focusing on doing high-end launch consulting. I was basically doing launch consulting for like people that wanted to do like 7-figure launches. And so I was technically a brand, and I spoke and did some presentations on a few places, but I wasn't really putting out a lot of content or anything. My way to get clients was more for like networking and going to events and things along those lines, working with, doing referrals. Anyways, at that time, for that first year, I was terrified of doing the Facebook Live, and I was terrified of actually posting stuff on my personal page. I did post some stuff, but I wasn't really like, I didn't really go all in on it. Like, what are my friends going to think if I'm posting stuff on my personal profile? And it turns out that they don't see it. It's like crazy how the brain works. Anyways, and now it's like one of those things where it's like, in hindsight, I'm like, that's where I wouldn't say I want to strangle myself, but there's that part of me where if I could have gotten over myself quicker, I would have just progressed that much faster when it comes to yourself out there and building your personal brand. And here's the thing I'll tell you is that if the people who, and I'm not saying this is easy, but the people who, especially personal brands and experts, the people who go from like $0 to $100,000, $200,000 per year the fastest, or even who go from 0 to 7 figures the fastest, one of the big things they have in common is that they don't have hangups when it comes to being seen, when it comes to putting themselves out there. They'll just do it. They're not having, they probably they might have imposter syndrome like a lot of people do, but they move forward and still do the Facebook Lives. They still get on the stages. They'll still put out their content, even in spite of the imposter syndrome. And there's a lot of really well-meaning people that they end up staying stuck or don't even get that initial traction because they're so terrified of, oh, what are people going to think about me? Oh, what if people don't like what I'm going to say? And now, to be honest, I do have sympathy for that. I am empathetic for that because I know it's not easy. And some people do have legitimate blocks that they need to resolve. But a lot of people, it's just, it is just an unwillingness to do the work, to do the hard work of getting out there.
Mm-hmm. And I can understand that in a sense. I wrote about this once because I was trying to describe what it felt like in my head before and after I had done a thing that was scary to me. And before I did the thing, it felt like I was standing at the base of Mount Everest, looking up at the top, completely unprepared for this, going, how in the ever-loving hell am I going to get from here to there? And when I just jumped in and did the thing, I realized it wasn't actually Everest. It was like a little anthill that I could have just kicked over with my foot, but my brain had just magnified it to epic proportions.
Oh, yeah. Especially when it comes to, now there are, especially when it comes to a lot of these things that along those lines, they're technically not difficult at all. Like when you talk about and we're talking in the context of putting yourself out there and being visible. When you're talking about like the context, like the things you need to do a Facebook Live, it's like not that hard. You have to like put out your phone or go on to Facebook and press a couple buttons and voila, you're live. Or technically what it takes to post something on Instagram, or technically what it takes to take one of the articles that you've written and post it on the internet. This is like not the most complicated thing in the world. Even stuff that really gets people hung up, which I know it's still is very important to mention, is even things that really gets a lot of people hung up, like things like networking or reaching out to people to be on their podcast or to like sell them something, to send them a message, right? To write down a text message and press send. This is stuff that people do hundreds of times a day. This is not that difficult, right? It's just that anxiety. But if you can just get rid of that or learn to deal with it, you're going to progress really at light speed. Because this is the thing that the reason why most people don't, I was going to say, this is the thing that holds people up. The reason most people actually know what they need to do to get to the next level, they just don't do it because they have this kind of anxiety that we're talking about. So if you can just get over that or move forward and fight, in spite of that, your business and life are going to really improve at rapid speed.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting because there's even a meta application to you saying that. And that's the fact that we're talking at all, right? At one point, I was on a separate call with Cindy and said, I'm looking for more guests. Does anybody know somebody that I should talk to? And then you're talking to Cindy at some point and it comes up that you want to be on more podcasts. And then Cindy has this light bulb moment of connecting the two of us. But both of us made the ask. And then Cindy thought to connect us, which I think is great.
And there you go.
And the funny thing that you mentioned, I think, about putting yourself out there is that dichotomy of the fact that it's never been easier to put yourself out there. I mean,
absolutely.
I obsessed with learning the right way to podcast before I launched this thing, before ultimately figuring out I need a microphone, some headphones, and a strong connection with Zoom. And then my editor makes the magic happen. And that was also an ask. I reached out to people and said, who do you know that can help me with this? I can't edit it. I'm struggling to edit. Help.
Right.
And it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, but I built it up into that mountain in my head. And that ties back to something, you worked with Ryan Levesque. Ryan Levesque is also runs in the same circles with the person that I used to work behind the scenes with, which is Jeff Walker.
Yeah.
And Jeff used to try and coach people out of that comfort zone into stepping out and putting themselves out there by saying, you might as well start now because no one's paying attention. And right. I love that fact. When you are first starting out, I hate to break it to you, but you could share that on your Facebook timeline all you want, put it out on the internet. No one's paying attention. What makes them start paying attention is your consistency in showing up.
Absolutely.
And by the very act of consistently showing up, you get better. So by the time they're paying attention, you've gotten all of those kinks out of the system.
Yeah, for sure. And then this one note about being consistent. I wouldn't call it a secret, but so I can't remember where this quote came from, but it was a book about relationships where the line is that kids spell love Time. Basically, the way you show love to your child is by spending time with them. This is actually true when it comes to marketing, is that the way people get more, the way you get people more warm to buy your stuff is independent of if you're using good marketing or anything, or even if your message is awesome. It's just by them spending more time with you, spending more time engaging with you. So it's almost kind of a hack in the sense that just being consistent, even if your content is not good, I mean, it will be good.
Yeah.
But as a result of practice and by the law of large numbers. But if all you were was consistent, you eventually are going to really get some great traction with your personal brand because that's going to result in more people spending time engaging with you.
Reading, was it the Common Path to Uncommon Success by John Lee Dumas, who's another podcast host, Entrepreneurs on Fire. He's a big name in the business industry if you haven't heard of him. And one thing that he described in the book that really stood out to me was this experiment with two sides of a pottery class. And one side for this social experiment, they told them, give us your one single best piece of pottery, and that is going to be your grade for the entire semester. And then the other side of the class, they said, give us as many pots as possible. And the people that make the most pots over the course of the semester are going to get the best grade. And so we've got two different goals, one single best piece and as many pieces as possible. And the interesting thing was that I don't think anybody expected when they conducted this experiment, the people that were focused on creating the single best piece got so hung up on creating the perfect pot that they only made a few and they were generally pretty sucky. Whereas the people that were making as many pots as possible actually got pretty damn good, even though they weren't aiming at making good pots. They were just aiming at making pots. And so I think that really serves to reinforce what you were saying about just by doing the reps, just by getting up and doing the work, you will eventually get good. Even if good is not technically what you're aiming for, just doing the work is what you're aiming for. I love that.
Absolutely. I have heard about the study before. One of my mentors described the name of Brian Johnson is the first guy I've heard it from. And he says 40 pounds equals an A. That's the study. It's all about put your 40 pounds out, put your 40 pounds of poverty out there. Another thing I love to say is that it pays to be prolific. So just being prolific, it's the same thing. That's going to result in a lot of good things.
Oh yeah. And this, I want to circle back to something interesting that you were saying earlier when you first got started, which was this idea. I mean, you said it I wrote it on the internet, but I was afraid to post it in my Facebook page. But what I kind of heard, just my own interpretation, and tell me if I'm wrong or not, was that like there was this separation between business Ron and personal Ron. Like my business friends know what I'm trying to do here, but my friends are going to be like, what the hell are you doing cluttering out my newsfeed?
Yeah, there was that. There was also, that was a thing for sure. Like my real friends and my business friends. And the other thing, as you were mentioning that, it was almost like, I don't mind like the ethers of the internet to like see what I'm doing, but like people that actually know me, and then being able to like judge and have thoughts about it. Oh, that's the thing that was freaking me out. For sure.
I totally get that feel. I think it surprises people that know me now that when I first joined the business realms, I was definitely very buttoned down, Angie. Professional suits, always hair and makeup done. And obviously that is not the case right now. You are looking at me on video. But I think I had this kind of head trash concept of this is what professional looks like. And I am not that if I don't look this way. Mm-hmm. And so it was I think actually it was a Ryan Levesque event. Like I want to say 2016 or 2017, I was there and I was talking to a small group of people. And I think I had a couple drinks in me and I got a little ranty about something and the walls came down a little bit. And I just started telling personal stories. And that was the first time at any kind of business event or gathering, I saw people physically lean in. Like wow. They immediately were interested in what I had to say. And it was clear that they had no idea that this Angie, whoever this alien was that came in and took over me when I had a couple drinks, they had no idea who this person was. And they were intrigued. And that was when I started experimenting. I mean, it was not an overnight transformation by any stretch of the imagination, but I started experimenting with telling more of my personal stories, geeking out about Disney, which is one of my true obsessions in life. And the more I told about myself in a business context, the more my business influence kind of grew because people got to see the person behind the business. And I think that they really like that. But I never would have guessed that on my own if I hadn't literally seen people lean in. I probably would still be trying to be quote unquote professional.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we can do a whole other podcast about this. And kind of along these same lines is that, there's a lot of people that do, if you're some kind of expert, there's a lot of business coaches out there. There's a lot of health coaches out there. There's a lot of personal development coaches out there. There's a lot of relationship coaches out there and everything in between. And there's many that are as good as you, maybe even better than you. Mm-hmm. But the one that no one has is that one advantage you have, I should say, is that you are you, that you bring your unique personality, your unique DNA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, of course, 100%, like it's another kind of marketing hack is that getting people connected to you as the person, to your personality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have detailed trainings on how to actually do this. But just doing that is actually a more powerful marketing mechanism than having fancy copy, even having a great offer sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I can't think of another business coach out there that would jokingly tell her students, and I have totally done this. We're talking about me, just in case it's not clear. I told her students, you don't need permission to be an expert. You just need to get out there and help people knowing what you know right now, and you'll get better just by the process of helping people. So if you've been waiting to be anointed an expert, here is the vodka bottle of anointing. You are now anointed, go be an expert. And then when we wound up at an event in 2019 together, I actually had a fake Tito's label made and went out and bought a fifth of Tito's and we all did expert anointing shots. That's just my personal brand of business coaching. It seems to work for me. But I don't say anything necessarily like groundbreaking. I know that sounds bad, but like I'm just sharing what worked for me when it finally clicked through my own unique filter. And that's what connected with those people. It's not that I said something that was new and never been heard before, because humans have been around for thousands and thousands of years and there's not really anything new anymore, guys, unless you're Steve Jobs of the world or the Walt Disney of the world. But I think that that's another way that people get hung up when it comes to stepping out and owning their expertise, because it's like, I don't have anything new to say. So that's why I was really resonating on what you said. It's you. You are the secret sauce.
Absolutely, for sure. 100%. There are new. The thing is, you do have things that are new to say, because I thought that you were. So the truth is, you are you. So even if you didn't have anything new to say, you'd be fine. But the truth of the matter is that when you're saying something, if it's a new idea, if you're teaching on whatever your subject matter expertise is, whatever you're teaching is coming through your filter. It's coming through like everything you've done in your life. It's coming through your brain and how you're analyzing it. So it actually is, in a lot of ways, it is unique in the sense that it's your version of truth or whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot of power to that. I cannot tell you, and you probably have the same experience when it comes to like consuming content. So I made my first sale online in 2007. I'm a total business marketing junkie. I'm a total personal development junkie. I don't really have any other hobbies or other than that. What I'm getting at is that, and I know my stuff. I've done 3-day seminars on like launches and on all sorts of and on other marketing topics. I have courses on mindset. So I have all sorts of stuff. And what I'm getting at is that I cannot tell you how many times I'm at an event or I see somebody's presentation on Facebook, and it's like I've heard this before, but it's like I didn't hear it exactly that way. And that's why it's like or maybe it's like I didn't hear it exactly that way, or it's reminding me about something that I forgot about. I'm like, oh wow, that's really, really interesting. Like even if it's like really basic stuff, if it's stuff that I know, and I'm like in advance too, like I know all sorts of stuff. So the point I'm getting at is that again, as long as you're pretty much if you're presenting, if it's coming from the heart, and if you've just done the work, if it's coming from the heart, if you do the work and you're thoughtful about what you're putting out there and you're doing it to help other people and you know who you're talking to, basically if you do the work, if you're a professional about it, then the right people, it's going to resonate with the right people, or at least some of what you're going to talk about is going to resonate with the right people.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, that you're going to resonate with the right people by being yourself and building the business in the way that feels true and authentic to you. Right. And I have fallen into that trap before in building my business of what if they don't like me, and done I'm kind of a self-development junkie too. So in all of the unpacking and the therapy and the things that I've done to kind of confront that fear head on, what if they don't like me? I came up with this brilliant, but not entirely brilliant solution, which is that's okay. I don't like a lot of people either. Like, why do I need everybody to like me? I don't like everybody. It's fine. We're going to have to do a couple of follow-ups, it sounds like, because we had a couple of threads that I was writing down here that I want to unpack. But for now, I want to hear where we can find you on the internet and learn more.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. Yeah, best places to find me are two places. Actually, I'll give you both. One is just find me on Facebook. I post a lot of stuff on my personal Facebook profile. So hopefully you can put the link in there in the show notes. Also, I have a Facebook group, a free Facebook group, which is called Heroic Profits for Mission-Driven Coaches and Experts. There's a lot of detailed trainings on there. There's hours and hours of video content. It's really a lot of really, really good stuff. So I would definitely find me in the group and you'll find out.
That's awesome. And if you happen to find yourself in Colombia, you should definitely go hang out with Ron. I've done it. It's a lot of fun.
Where all the cool kids hang out. Absolutely.
It really is. I can't wait to go back. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
So that is it. Another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.